We're starting a real lesson on typography. It's really important because I think that doing typography well is really difficult, and it's one of those things that sets people apart, that sets designers apart from people who just happen to know how to do some cool stuff on Photoshop. So let's look at these real quick, and actually I'm going to pull down some guides. Okay, now this right here from this line to the bottom line, so this is the base right here. This is the cap height, right? The height of the capital letters. Makes sense? Cap height, the baseline, and then this is X height. X height is the height of most parts of a lowercase letter. As you can see here, the rounded letters like the F and the G, the rounded part actually goes above the X height. And that's, in the case of the G, that's by design. What that's for is because rounded shapes tend to look smaller to us. And so in order to make it look like the G goes up as high as the other lowercase letters, they actually make the top go a little bit higher than the X height. Okay, this right here is called a descender, and this part where the F comes up and where the T comes up above the cap height line is called an ascender. Okay, so got the base height, the X height, and the cap height. Descenders and ascenders. Ascenders come above the line. It has serifs. Now let's talk about serif and sans serif, because those are the two main types of type. So this right here is serif. Serifs are these little, they call them feet and ears. The little feet and ears, they provide kind of a visual guideline that helps you read a page. So you'll notice that in most of your textbooks, almost all of your textbooks, it will have some kind of, in the body text at least, it'll have some kind of serif, because serif text is the easiest to read when it's smaller and in large quantities. Okay? Sans serif would be something like, well, here, I'm only going to do two of them so that you can compare them better. So sans serif would be something like this. Okay, you see there are no ears and feet to it. The letter just kind of goes to the top and to the base. Now, sans serif can be good for title text, but it shouldn't be used for long paragraphs usually. For a lot of reading. I mean, it could be used in a paragraph if it really went with the style of the rest of your piece, but it's really generally not the best for reading long paragraphs. And then there are some other considerations that we'll talk about later. It's kind of like it looks handwritten, or based on calligraphy, and there are formal script fonts and informal ones. This one's more of a formal one. An informal one would be one that looks like it's, maybe handwritten with a marker. Then there's also monospace, and monospace isn't specific to serif or sans serif. It just has to do, a lot of letters, they have unique spacing between them. Like the A might have a certain amount of space after it, but the B might have a different amount of space after it. Well, monospace means they all have the exact same amount of space after them. And that's useful for certain things. But we're going to talk about kerning, so we don't really care about the spacing because we can adjust that. And then you have novelty, right? Novelty are things that are largely influenced by trends, and they don't usually tend to last that long. You've got to stay on top of it. So there's a novelty. This one is novelty. Okay. So let's talk about text as far as points go. Right here, you guys see where it says PT after the number? That's how many points there are. And typically there are 72 points in an inch. And different fonts are going to be different sizes. Actually, these are kind of similar, actually, but sometimes different fonts will be different size. Okay, here you can see definitely different size, even though they're both 72 points. So typefaces, a lot of times they'll come in families. So we have Baskerville regular, italic, semi-bold, semi-bold italic, bold, and then bold italic. So in this Baskerville font family, we have 6 different specific fonts. We're going to talk now about letter spacing. Now you guys see here, the F and the G are touching, while the X and the T seem really far away. And it's like I told you guys before, that there are sometimes different amounts of space between the letters in certain fonts if it's not a monospaced font. But when you're doing headings or really important pieces of big text, real designers almost never leave the default letter spacing. You're almost always going to adjust it. So here, and here's where you do that. It's this little dialog box right here, the character dialog box. So here you can control the size and a few other things. Right now I'm going to talk about the kerning or the letter spacing, and that's right here. It's got the 2 letters and then a sideways arrow going in both directions under it. Be at 0. That's obviously too close for this typeface. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to spread it out so that the F and G are close enough to each other but not touching each other. Well, then we see that the X and the T are still too far away. Sorry, select both the F and the X. We'll put them at 0. Alright, that looks a lot better. I'm actually not even going to adjust that at this point. Now we're going to select the T and the G. I'm actually going to track those out just a little bit. And let's just select the T. And let's pull the G in closer. And since that T is so high, we can pull the G. We don't want to pull it like right up into it like it's cuddling with its mama, but we want it to be close enough where it doesn't look like the T isn't a part of it. Alright, can you guys see that that looks a lot more natural now? Let's talk about the next thing is leading. And just somebody give me a simple but appropriate sentence.
The orange was good. I thought you meant like that involved letting.
Oh, not necessarily. Okay, the orange was good. Alright, so in this case, this spacing might work well. This leading is the space between lines. This might look good, you know, if it was small and it was in a paragraph. But for a title, is it too close or too far? Yeah, it's too far. We come up here, this is where the leading is, and we're just going to pull it down to right here. Now if that G wasn't there, I put it even closer. I might bring it down just a little farther. You can just space it out so that the D doesn't hit the descender of the G. Okay? Now let's talk about balancing your headlines. And this applies whether you're centering your headlines, right aligning them, or left aligning them. You don't want to do something like this.
Centering it?
No, you can center it sometimes. Stretch that out. Okay? this doesn't look good. So the first problem is that it's not balanced. It doesn't matter what the next word is. You don't want to have all of this up here and then one word on the next line of a title. You either want to put the orange was good all in one line, or you'd want to make it where the was is down here with it. Okay? You just don't want to have it where it looks like it's leaning out. Now, what if we said the
orange was good.
The orange. I was gonna say like the color of the orange, but that would be the orange.
The first orange. Oh, no. The big orange was good. Is that still unbalanced?
No.
No, that one looks pretty balanced because, as you can see, it doesn't look like this part is about to kind of fall off of it. If think about it being like the bottom line is maybe the table and the top line is like a book or something on the table. The book can stick off the table a little bit. It's just that at a certain point it's going to stick off so much that it falls. That's what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid the top line sticking over the bottom line so much that it looks like it's something Mike mentioned was when you're dividing up your text, another consideration aside from the balance is how is this going to read? Okay? Think about how someone who, you're familiar with it, right? Because you're the one who's putting it together, so you know how it should read. But try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's not already familiar with it. How are they going to read it? Are they going to read the orange was good, or are they going to read the orange was good? So you have to learn to test things out, and it's hard to do because you already know what it's supposed to be like. But you have to put yourself in people's shoes. So we divide up text based on making sure that it looks balanced and also making sure that it reads the way that we want it to read. Let's talk about when we combine different typefaces. Because you want to combine two typefaces, not that contradict each other, but that are very different from each other, that are contrasting. And there's a difference between contradiction and contrast. Okay? To contradict something is to go against it. To contrast with something is to be different enough that it draws attention. Midnight Snacks. We're going to make a logo type. Does everybody know what a logo type is? Logo type is basically a logo that all you do is make adjustments to the letter form. You don't add any kind of pictograph, any kind of image. So, Hefty's Midnight Snacks. All right, we're going to shrink the size of this because we want this all to be on the same line. Sometimes it does that. All right, so for Hefty's, this is a heavy font, but it's kind of like rounded. So it's hefty. It looks, it's kind of fancy, scripty, but it's round and heavy. So I'm actually okay with it the way that it is, except that obviously we need to adjust the spacing here. Here we have kind of a Mediterranean style font. Now this is very different from the other one. I mean, first of all, the other one is serif. This is sans serif. The other one's fat. This one's thin. But this one carries connotations that we might not want to carry. It looks like a Mediterranean
Looks like it would be on the front of a hummus
cuisine. Exactly. Manifesto. This looks like a show title, right? Like for a Broadway show, right? Definitely not. We're not trying to communicate Broadway show. Okay. Now we've already got something that's kind of scripty, so we don't want to go with another script because we can go to. We probably aren't going to go to another serif font. We're not going to go to another serif font, and we're not going to go to another scripty font. You guys can see how these are similar but different, but not different enough. It doesn't look right.
That one looks like medieval.
Now, we might want to go with a complementary typeface that's thin and sans serif. So let's find one that's kind of thin
And sans serif.
and sans serif. This one, yes, this one is an okay choice, but it's still too heavy of a font. I really want something that contrasts with the hefty font. Okay,
That one meets the requirement.
this one I like. Okay, and I might make it smaller so that it aligns with the right and left, or it doesn't really have to. It can be smaller, or it can be slightly longer than the original. And I feel like this kerning is acceptable for this. So we've got Hefty's Midnight Snacks here. And you guys can see that the contrast between the two
That looks good.
typefaces actually looks good, whereas when we mixed another script typeface or when we mixed something else that was still heavy or that was serifed, there wasn't enough contrast. It just looked like we were being lazy. So guys, another thing to consider when you're designing is what is the orientation of the space that you have to fit something in. So in here, we probably want a typeface that is maybe a little bit shorter compared to other versions, or compared to other typefaces. So in this one, guys, the cap height is at least twice as tall as the X height, right? So that might not look that good in a short long space or a short wide space, but it might look a lot better if your text box had to fit in something like this.